Hi, everybody, and welcome back to my podcast on sacred relationships. Today, I'm going to talk about being married to your shadow. Our shadow self is the part of us that we have been conditioned to mistrust, to fear, to loathe. From a very young age, well-meaning parents, teachers, society project on us certain ideas about who we're supposed to be in order to fit in. And without even meaning to, we start to adapt to those ideas. We change our behavior and we tuck backstage in our consciousness any part of us that we've been taught to see as unacceptable. So say, for example, you are a flamboyant child and you are born into a family of very serious people. They might try to tame that flamboyance and tell you that it's unacceptable. Maybe it's unladylike or ungentlemanly. And so you try to push that behavior down inside of yourself and you see it as something that is unacceptable. You might even later on come to judge others that show that kind of trait because you've been taught to do so. So what happens when we become adults? We're actually attracted to our shadow. Quite often, we will choose a partner, not consciously so, but we will choose a partner who has the very traits we were taught to suppress. We may be drawn to somebody who, for example, is flamboyant because we see something that deep down we've been missing in ourselves. It's part of our original self before we got all that conditioning. So in a sense, we're literally missing ourselves and looking around in the world to find those parts of us so that when we do encounter a partner who exemplifies those traits, we're irresistibly drawn to them. However, once we end up in a committed relationship, quite often what happens is our subconscious patterning around relationship and around family kicks in. And we might end up putting down those very traits we see in our partner or be irritated by those traits that we originally were so drawn to. Because what's happening is our core conditioning is kicking in that says that's unacceptable and therefore it can't happen. It has to be suppressed. So it's really valuable when we enter into relationship to be aware that if we find ourselves triggered in some way by our partner's behavior, rather than try to get them to be different, we look at why we're triggered in the first place. What is it about the scenario that's bringing something up for us? And what is it that's coming up? Quite often, we feel we need to somehow control the behavior we're seeing. But why would we want to control it? So it's a really valuable thing to ask yourself if you see a trait that you're struggling with. You've chosen somebody who's gotten through their whole life with that trait and has been acceptable to you at the time you met with that trait. So why are you struggling now? What core patterns did you bring to the relationship in the first place that this is now an issue for you? So one of the things we can look at is the fact that this person has managed their whole life to function and to succeed as they are. There's no need for us to change them. And I'm not talking about those moments where we're simply looking to compromise and smooth out some of the kinks in our relationship that might not work for us. Sometimes it's, basic things like how we coordinate activities at home or what sort of things we like or don't like that we might not watch that show all the time. If our partner doesn't like it, we might pick a time to watch it when they're busy doing something else. Those kinds of compromise, that's a separate thing. But if you're looking at something that time and again brings something to the surface for you, don't redirect it by focusing on what your partner is doing. Look instead at why you're having such a hard time with it. If you're having, for example, a powerful emotional reaction to something that, if you step back and look at it intellectually, is really quite minor, then you know a core pattern is being triggered. And you know that's worth you turning inward and looking at it. We're actually drawn to people who have complementary patterns. We're drawn to somebody who's going to trigger our stuff so that we get to look at it. That's why it's a sacred relationship, so that we can actually do the spiritual work with that person. And the gritty part of the work is it's not always comfortable. Sometimes we're having to look at things we don't want to see. And a lot of times when we're looking at our shadow, it's parts of ourselves we've been conditioned to not want to even acknowledge are part of who we are. So when you see your partner doing something that triggers you, rather than try to control them, ask yourself, what part of me is like that? What part of me, had I given it permission, would have acted that way in the world? And can I now give myself the freedom? Can I give myself permission to let that part of myself come to the surface so it can become conscious, it can integrate with the rest of me, and it can become a constructive, functional part of my being? Can I let that up? Because if you can do that, ultimately what you will find is you will come to love that part of yourself that you were taught to fear or reject. So that's a wonderful part of being connected to your shadow. Your partner will hold up a mirror to the parts of yourself you were taught to reject. Parts you may not even remember anymore are who you are. You know, there's the us that we've been conditioned to be, and then there's our true nature. And one of the most beautiful and exciting things you can do in a sacred relationship is awaken to your true nature. Love and accept parts of you that might have been tamed out of existence or really into dormancy, that can now awaken and add spark to your relationship. I remember many years ago going to a therapeutic touch conference, and I knew there was going to be a drum circle at this event. Now, I love to drum. I also love to dance, and I've been trained as a belly dancer. So I brought all my veils and my jingle skirts. I brought all my paraphernalia with me. And one evening when we were having the drum circle, I donned all of my stuff, all my veils and my skirts. And I walked into the center of the circle and I began to dance. And there was another woman dancing with me who was similarly garbed. And as the dancing continued, and I was wearing, a bodysuit and tights underneath, but so as the dancing continued, I started to remove some of my veils and my skirts and handed them to other people sitting in the audience. And I still remember this tall, slim woman who seemed very, I don't want to say repressed, but very, very quiet, very kind of tucked inside herself. And when I handed her one of these skirts, and I've got to tell you right now, if you've never tried it, putting on these skirts and learning how to move in it so that they make music is so much fun. It's, whether you're trained or not, it's just pure fun. So after a few minutes, she's up on a chair, she's dancing up a storm, and friends of hers are looking at her going, oh, I never thought I would see her do that. She had found that joyful, childlike dancer inside of herself and let that part out to play. That is essentially what we're doing when we embrace our shadow. We're letting parts come up to play, to express. And yeah, sometimes they're going to express some pretty heavy emotions we've been blocking. And once they've gotten to do that and they've been accepted and appreciated, they can learn how to play as well. But there's also those parts of you that are mischievous, that are creative, that are playful, that are soft, that are gentle, that might never have been allowed to the surface. There's so much beauty in doing the shadow work. So when you see your partner doing something that challenges you, ask yourself, can I find that inside myself? Can I find a way to love and accept and maybe even admire that trait? See the good in it instead of seeing it as a negative. Because if you can do that, if you can appreciate when your partner holds up a mirror to those parts of yourself and you can turn inward and find them and work with them and allow them to come to the surface and dance and play, you're really falling back in love with yourself. And the more you can love yourself and accept the myriad parts of you, the more open and loving you become to your partner as well. And the more loving and accepting you become of your partner's traits, all their beautiful qualities that make up the kaleidoscope of who they are. So I invite you to notice when you feel a trigger and think of it as an opportunity to say, what part of me wants to come to the surface that's on the other side of that uncomfortable emotion? Can I allow it out to play? Thanks so much for joining me this week. I look forward to seeing you next time.